Now the Corona series, though, is different.
So that was different. I was actually, funnily enough, I was rereading a book called The Rose Garden Game, which is actually about prayer beads and the history of prayer beads, of the prayer beads that eventually became the Rosary. But they started off actually, the 5 decades, the 5 tens, which you then did 3 times to do 150 prayers, actually started off inspired by the Psalter. There were sets of beads for the 150 psalms, and lay brothers who didn't have Latin and couldn't be up in the choir with the priests actually singing every psalm in Latin, because, as you know, the Benedictine thing was to go through the whole Psalter. Yeah. Often as frequently as once a week, the entire Psalter, but certainly, as in Cranmer's prayer book, once a month you'd do the whole thing, all 150. So these lay brothers wanted to join in with this, and various sets of much shorter prayers were composed, sometimes just the same prayer repeated, but they could go through and do 150, counting them out. And eventually that became a Marian Psalter, and it became Mary in the Rose Garden, the Rosarium. And the word corona had by then been used. Corona, of course, means a crown, that's coronet, but was also used not only for chaplets of flowers around a head or crowns on a head, but also for the sets of beads, because you went right round all the way to the beginning, and then the last bead was the one you started off again. So those were sometimes called a corona. And then John Donne had famously written a beautiful sequence of poems addressed to Christ, called La Corona, which begins with the line, "Deign at my hands this crown of prayer and praise." It's the opening line, and it's the last line of the sequence of 7 sonnets. So the last line takes you back to the beginning. And that set of poems by Donne, which had already inspired me in more ways than one, starts with the Annunciation and finishes with the Ascension, and is the whole Christ story. So all these things were sort of floating around in my mind, and I'd been returning to the Psalms because I wasn't commuting out, because Maggie and I were having a chance to say the offices together a little bit more. She was doing, we were saying evening prayer together. And I was really re-engaging with the Psalter and realising just how much it came alive in this, the Psalms.
Can you read one of those now for us?
Imprecations. So in the end, I decided to write a corona on the Psalms. Maybe since we're under a tree, I'll read you the opening one for Beatus Vir.
Lovely.
Blessed is the man, he should be like a tree planted by the waters.
No,
Psalm 1.
Psalm 1, yes.
And of course, one of the things I realised is that I had to make sure the opening line would be the closing line of the entire sequence on the Psalter. So before I wrote my poem on Psalm 1, I soaked myself in Psalm 150.
Yeah. Lovely.
And I realised that where the Psalter brings you after dire darkness and the absolute nadir of Psalm 88, which has no turn in it, it takes you gradually back up into sheer glorious praise. The last 5 psalms are just, and it's inviting you to come to a place where every breath is praise. And so I thought that'll be the last line of the poem, and I know now that that's the invitation of Beatus Vir.
It's lovely.
So here's the opening poem, David's Crowns. The whole sequence is called Beatus Vir. Come to the place where every breath is praise, and God is breathing through each passing breeze. Be planted by the waterside, and raise your arms with Christ beneath these rooted trees, who lift their breathing leaves up to the skies. Be rooted too, as still and strong as these, open alike to sun and rain. Arise from meditation by these waters. Bear the fruits of that deep-rootedness. Be wise in the trees' long wisdom. Learn to share the secret of their patience. Pass the day in their green fastness and their quiet air. Slowly discern a life, a truth, a way, where simple being flowers in delight. Then let the chaff of life just blow away. One of the ways I made this a corona was to take the last line of each poem and make it the first line of the next one. And so sometimes, and I became really interested in the transitions in the Psalms, in the power of the transition between the
Between
really
the
sharp.
Psalms?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So 35, just as an example, 35 is a very difficult psalm, but 36 is the one, in your light we shall see life, and it's about drawing water from the well of life. So maybe I'll just read that one to you, just to show you that you get these resting places in these psalms, you get this deep refreshment, which the arts ought to provide as well. You can't spend the whole time being harrowed and having your withers run. You actually need something